Welcome to the Business of Travel, the official podcast of the Global Business Travel Association. I'm Chris Elmett, professional moderator, and I've been working with GBTA, hosting discussions on the future of business travel for over a decade. And it feels like the industry has never had so much to address as it does now. I'll be your host for today's episode, and I'm joined from Australia by
Siobhan Prideaux. I am Senior Sales Director for Asia Pacific with BCD Travel, and I've been in the travel industry for a little over 20 years and have experience across operations, sales and account management. And at the moment I work with our clients in Asia Pacific, prospective clients, to help build bespoke travel programs.
Fantastic. Thank you, Siobhan. It's great to have you with us. And I'm also joined from the UK by...
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Whiting. My title is Director of Global Solutions Engineering, but what it actually means is I look after digital, innovation, and technology here at BCD Travel.
Fantastic. It's great to have you with us again. Sarah, we were together in Europe just a couple of months ago, debating some of the topics that indeed we're going to debate today. Now, this podcast brought to you by BCD Travel is entitled Divisive Debates. In it, we'll dive into some of the contested topics which are shaping the future of business travel. Over the next 15 minutes, we want to find out what the debates we had in Asia Pacific, in Europe and Australia reveal about three themes. The first is the future of OBTs. Are they on the brink of extinction to be replaced by new AI-only solutions, or are they evolving by harnessing the power of AI and chatbots? The second topic is next generation traveller behaviour. Does flexibility and simplicity drive better outcomes than rigid policy? Is it time for us to reconsider our approach as we seek to stay relevant to the next generation of business traveller? And our third topic is biometrics and secure ID. Will the adoption of new technology in biometrics and secure ID streamline things or create new global challenges? Now, this podcast is entitled Divisive Debates, so let's jump in with the first one that's on everyone's minds these days, the future of OBTs. Siobhan, you were in Asia-Pac and Australia listening to this debate rage. What were your key takeaways from the debate that you want to share with us today?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I found this one to be very interesting when I was watching the debates. It is really hard to argue that there are not substantial changes occurring in the way that we book travel, and that these changes need to be embraced, like they're coming really fast. We only have to look at AI in the travel industry and how it is already being used within the current platforms. The reality is that the OBTs as we know it will become obsolete. However, and I have had this debate with a number of industry colleagues past the debates that were held in APAC and Australia, I would argue that yes, the platform will change, but it's going to be an evolution. We still need an interface, whether it be an app, an integration with Teams, Slack, Microsoft, or something has not yet been released, to overlay the distribution channels and aggregate the content to bring in the results to the consumer in a pretty and user-friendly format. As the panelists discussed AI as an alternative to our existing OBTs, there were also a number of good points raised around areas that need a lot of consideration as we move forward. For example, data security, privacy, the differing AI policies between company to company, and even what happens when the errors can keep coming up, and there is a lot of error concerns out there. I think although each company's appetite for AI will vary, our survey results at the debate showed that most organisations are either investing in AI themselves or are looking to partner with suppliers who have a robust and holistic AI approach to improving service and also, obviously, technology delivery. We only have to look at the questions that are included in RFPs at the moment to truly understand how much of a focus organisations are putting on the evolution of the online booking platforms.
Fantastic. Clearly, a lot of focus on this area. There's a couple of different ways that you've summarised for us there that people are approaching this. So, Sarah, how do Siobhan's conclusions compare with where we landed in Europe, if you'll forgive the pun?
Where we landed in Europe was that it's not a matter of whether or not AI is going to be a part of the booking process or even potentially replace it completely. It's a matter of when, especially if you look at how many queries we're seeing. There was so many great stats that were shared on stage in terms of the quadrillions of chats going back and forth across various different large language models. And then it kicked up the really big argument in Europe, which is around sustainability and whether or not, if we have, for example, a future whereby the online booking tool interface goes away, AI replaces it, how are we able to keep up with all of those queries in terms of the data source and the power in the background? So we can make sure that we're not creating an unsustainable environment. And then the sort of response to that argument was that actually AI can help us to manage the usage of that power. It can create some efficiencies and kind of help itself to be successful. So I do think it's sort of not a matter of if, but a matter of when we're going to see AI replacing that online booking tool environment.
Clear. Thanks very much. Great. So let's move on to booking behaviour and policy. Sarah, I'm going to keep the mic with you. Can you summarise for us the arguments and tell us at the Europe conference, was the room able to come to a consensus about whether flexibility drives better outcomes compared to rigid policy?
I think there is a mix of arguments in Europe. So the summary of the arguments was that there should be flexibility in terms of policy, that we should be giving travelers and line managers the agency to understand their budgets, to make the right decision on behalf of the business, and to kind of strip away all of those guardrails that traditionally exist within corporate travel. The counter argument to that was, can we trust that everyone's interpretation of a policy is going to be the same? Even regional nuances, cultural nuances might create an issue in terms of the way in which different people apply that sort of common sense. And then you have what we call the new age or the Gen Z generation, which is those that are sort of not necessarily used to those corporate guardrails. And the poll results suggested that actually the audience didn't trust that new generation in terms of their common sense levels and whether or not they'd stick to the budget, which I found interesting and surprising, but also I think the argument still stood that we should have some flexibility, but that there has to be those sort of checks and balances at the manager level.
Fantastic. So actually that sounds to me like the audience was not seeing the seismic change in this area compared to, for instance, OBTs. This was a little evolution of how we're doing things rather than anything bigger than that. Would that be fair?
Absolutely. This is a softly, whereas I feel like the AI argument was a big bang.
Fair enough. Great. Thank you. Siobhan, how does that contrast with what you saw in the debates across Asia-Pac and Australia?
Yeah, I think it was very similar. Some of the other themes that came out of the debates in Asia Pacific and Australia was also the emphasis on requests for pleasure and well-being within a travel policy and the complexities that then adds to the travel policy. So the challenge for travel managers, and this will really depend on the market as well, because in Asia, every market has very different requirements and different regulations, but there can be a number of considerations that go outside of just letting someone extend their trip. It could be like tax implications such as fringe benefit tax, approvals, how do we manage split payments, who's responsible for duty of care and insurance when the traveller is actually on the leisure portion of their business travel. And all of this is actually delivering and driving more complexity into travel policies, even though we would like to make them more simple. There was actually a short survey during the debate that showed that in Singapore, particularly, 68% of travel managers predicted that their policy will become more complex compared to only 28% who said it would become more simple. And this has actually got a lot to do with the changes in the industry as well. So to Sarah's point before, yes, it's about trying to put guardrails around the travel policy, but there's more things that we need to take into consideration now as well, such as, duty of care requirements continually changing, entry requirements continually changing, greater focus on that ESG, sustainability and well-being, and then balancing that against cost control while still providing that improved traveller experience as well to your traveller while they're out on the road. And I think what really came through is that there needs to be that really subtle art of influencing travellers' buying behaviours even through the travel policy, rather than necessarily saying you can or can't fly business class. It's about empowering people to make the right decisions, as well as giving them, I guess, the confines to be able to do that.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So let's go on to the final area of discussion, and I'm going to stay with you, Siobhan. We're looking at this topic of biometrics and secure ID. Can you give us, in your conclusion of where we landed in this debate, just also give us a couple more sentences on what that comprises? What are we talking about when we talk about biometrics and secure ID, and where did the debate land in Asia-Pac and Australia?
Yeah, I think that this was probably one of the more heated topics within the area, because obviously there is a lot of positives that are seen through the biometric side around ease of travel. It's also about faster processing and enhanced security. But then there was a lot of negatives around it as well, and a lot of fear around that whole security. It's about privacy and so forth. And what they're talking about is really around being able to travel without, ultimately without visas, without boarding passes, using biometrics to be able to check into into an airline, for example. I was in Dallas not so long ago, and they were actually trialing biometrics rather than boarding passes to get onto planes. And it was where they were actually scanning your face to enter into the plane. It took at this stage a lot longer than what it would be just to scan your boarding pass, but you could see that biometrics is definitely evolving and coming into play. But it was quite interesting because, again, the Singapore or the Asia Pacific GBTA conference, when we surveyed people, actually 35% of attendees in that particular session said that they actually never think that it will be enabled at 100% or at scale globally because of compliance regulations, security risks, and so forth. So it was an interesting piece of the debate.
And this maybe didn't come out in the data, Siobhan, but just from your instinct, we asked the audience, when will biometrics be 100% enabled, which obviously means every traveller, every country. Did you sense that the debate was around not whether there'd be more of it in the future, but whether it would be absolutely ubiquitous, everyone using it, or just certain lanes, certain airports, and so on? Do you think that's where the debate was primarily focused?
I think so, and it does also come down to, I think, also in regards to a lot of countries, the implementation of biometrics is quite expensive. You've also got a lot of passports that still require a lot of visas and so forth, and so it's going to be a really big shift from going from that in, say, for example, India, where you need a visa for almost everywhere, to being able to just use your face as a scanner to be able to move through everything. I think it will definitely roll out a lot more, and it is coming, and it is moving at a faster pace than it was. But I wouldn't say the kind of debate made me feel like most people didn't think it was going to get 100% there anytime soon, definitely.
Cool. Thank you, Siobhan. Now, in theory, Sarah, when we talk about this topic, because we're talking about global travel, you'd expect Europe and Asia-Pac to kind of come to the same conclusions. But did they? What did we conclude in Europe?
So in Europe, about 100%, so nearly everyone, was in agreement that it was imminent that biometrics would be the main form of identifying and securing a certain traveler's identity through moving through different regions. Now, we've got a different set of visa rules here in Europe. It's easier to move throughout different member states. But I do feel like majority of the audience is aware that it's going to be happening. And then the argument came up, well, what about those who aren't as advanced with technology? Maybe they don't have a mobile phone. Maybe they aren't using sort of the same technology as everyone else. How are they going to be brought into the fold? And of course, the security element came up as well, in terms of where do we want surveillance to be stopped in the guise of convenience? Do we want governments overseas to have access to biometric information whereby they might be able to use it in ways that are not about travel? So that was the main and contentious argument that was happening in the room in Europe.
Understood. Very good. So we've covered a little taste of those three debates that we had across the three events. I'm just going to ask you both quickly to conclude, if you could. It could be a surprise or it could be a key takeaway from those debates that you heard and participated in. Siobhan, give me one takeout from those. It can be a surprise or a main conclusion that you make.
So I'm going to give you a surprise, Chris. I think the biggest surprise for me was just looking at the different survey results. And if I look at, for example, the online booking tool and AI portion that we surveyed, most people, 75%, would say that they would be investing heavily in AI and that that's exactly where the industry is going to go, where we had nearly 50% actually say that they don't see biometrics being at 100% usage ever. So for me, that was the biggest surprise. They're both technology advancements. They've both got the similar type of risks, I guess, in some instances. And yet there is a really strong appetite for one and a very lukewarm appetite or belief that it's going to eventuate for the other. So that was probably the biggest surprise for me.
Fantastic. Thank you. And for you, Sarah, what's your conclusion or key takeout from these debates?
My conclusion was similar to what we said on stage, Chris. It was that across all three of these topics, that moderation and balance is key. So whether it's saying that we have AI as a main sort of technology driver in our industry, but we still need EQ, that emotional intelligence, or whether we're saying we want there to be flexible policy, but we still need some guardrails, or whether we're saying we definitely see biometrics coming into our everyday, but we also want that security and all of those privacy aspects to be balanced out as well. So it's technology and advancement in moderation, I think, across all three of those topics.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So there you have it, 3 debates across 3 continents, summarised by our 2 presenters in 20 minutes. Thank you to both our experts, Sarah Whiting, Senior Director, Global Solutions Engineering at BCD Travel, and Siobhan Prideaux, Senior Director, Sales for APAC at BCD Travel. You've been listening to The Business of Travel, the official podcast of the Global Business Travel Association. For more information about GBTA and its work, visit gbta.org. And be sure to rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Until the next time, thanks for listening.